You have made it. Congratulations on being one step further to going from being the expert in your company to becoming the trusted authority in your industry. Let's address the elephant in the room because you might think, I'm not sure if I actually can become the authority because I don't have a PhD, nor do I ever plan to go back to university, and I haven't written a book, nor do I ever plan to write a book, or I don't have XYZ years of experience. Is it still possible for me to become the authority in my industry? And the short answer is yes. Yes, you absolutely can. And this is exactly what I'll share with you in this training session. Because for the context of today's training, we want to also establish common language. We want to identify what is the difference between an expert and an authority. Now, an expert is somebody who knows a lot. An authority, on the other hand, is somebody who is able to translate what they know in a way that makes sense to their decision makers. I always say the easiest way to explain an authority is that they are able to explain how they can solve a problem. An expert jumps straight into the challenge and solve the problem, often without being able how they actually went about it. So you see already, it is absolutely possible, no matter which industry you're in right now, which profession you're in right now, that you can actually become the go-to in your field. If you are more a visual learner, this is your explanation right there. An expert has a lot of knowledge, but it's usually quite dispersed. It's a lot, it's everywhere. An authority is able to connect the dots and can make sense out of their knowledge and is able to explain how all the moving parts work together to come to one solution. Now, if you see those two Steves, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, I'm curious, who do you relate more to? Is it Steve Wozniak? He's actually the brain behind Apple and Mac. He's the one who is the expert. He's the doer. Or Steve Jobs, the person who is able to connect the dots, who can explain what happens behind the scenes, how technology impacts our everyday lives. And again, there's no right or wrong. I just want you to check in to see where you are right now. Now, I had the pleasure to meet Steve Wozniak actually a couple of years ago at a business conference, and he made such an incredible comment when it comes to his role versus Steve Jobs' role. The video is only about 1 minute, but I think you will get so much value out of it. So let's listen to what Steve Wozniak has to say. Mic drop moment right there. Make it simple for everyone, largely for himself. You see, Steve Wozniak, he was the brain behind it. He was the one who designed and developed the technology. Steve Jobs was the one who was able to translate that into easy to understand language. And he also always said he is the person who orchestrates, and Steve Wozniak is the person who plays the instrument. So this is really a great sign of self-awareness. What role do you play, and where can you provide the biggest value in right now? So you see, Steve Wozniak is the expert. He knows exactly what we need to do in order to make the products more simple. Steve Jobs is the one who makes sense, who was the translator of why we only need to have 3 ports on each computer, or what an iPod and so much gigabyte actually means for us in an everyday situation. And an example, you can listen to 2 days worth of music with this in your pocket. Now, everyone knows what that actually means. But if I say it has 56 gigabyte, whatever that means, who knows? And this is exactly what the difference is between an expert and an authority. So let's address the elephant in the room. You have joined this training and opted in to learn what it takes to actually become the authority because you are probably not quite where you want to be. There is a gap. Unfortunately, this is something that we are not getting taught at school, how we can actually become not only the best at what we do, but also be recognized for what we do. I'm sure you've already had success. You've already gotten to this senior role, to this um, large size team that you're managing, to the credentials that you have earned. And this is great. But you also realize there's so much more that you want to conquer, that you want to be known for, that you want to leave your market. And if you're anything like me, you have got this itchy feeling all the time that you want to do more, you want to be more, you want to make a bigger impact, and you're kind of bored where you are. Or at the same time, because you have just stepped up or stepped into a new role, industry, profession, you also feel a little bit overwhelmed. So the most logical answer is obviously to upskill. So we invest a lot of money in traditional education to get another degree, to earn more stripes, to then realize that we actually don't have the time to work on our career, not just in our career. We are building our capabilities and become the most qualified and most experienced professional in our field. And yet, all the others who've got less experience, who've got less education and degrees, they get the promotion. And this frustrates me, and it always has frustrates me. Because, like it or not, and I'm sure you've realized that also, is that simply being the best at what you do doesn't mean that we get recognized for it, that we get respected for it. It's not because you're not the expert, it's because you are the expert, but not the trusted authority. And the trusted authority definition is that you are the go-to by choice, because people like you, they trust you, they don't have to follow you. So it's not authority by title and because of years experience and because of your tenure in an organization. It's because they actually buy into what you stand for, what you believe in. This is what the difference is, and this is what we can all take control of. What nobody tells us, especially in traditional education, is that there are a lot more steps to becoming successful. It's not just graduating from high school and then going to university and then earning our stripes and then getting the promotion. Then we've made it. It would be great. The reality is there are so many more steps in between. The middle here, the messy middle, to be more exact, is where it usually falls down, where we are not able to articulate our value, where we are not able to explain how we actually solve the problem, where we simply cannot answer easily and also confidently the question, why you? Why should we choose you and not every single other person who's got the same experience, the same education that you have? And this is not something that's new, to be honest. Back in 1996, Harvey Coleman already identified that our level of success comes down to only 10% to our performance, meaning how good we are in what we're doing. 30% comes down to our image that we put out there, and a whopping 60% comes down to visibility, meaning if we can't be found by the right people for the right reasons, we can be the best and still not getting anywhere. So our responsibility and our job is to actually let people know that we exist, what we can do for them, and why it matters. And I've experienced it way too well. I started in brand and product marketing. This is a photo of me graduating at university with the one and only goal to progress and stay in my marketing career in the brand and product industry. Fast moving consumer goods was my thing. And it was my thing for the next 10 years of my career until I got called into my manager's office. It was a Friday morning, and I thought, it must be time for my next promotion because I worked my backside off. I was the first in, last out, took on more responsibilities than every other of my peers. And this is how I progressed in the first 10 years of my career. So clearly, it must be time for my next promotion. Well, that didn't quite turn out that way. It actually the exact opposite happened. I was called into my manager's office. We went out for lunch and they put me on a performance improvement plan. One thing that I did not see coming. The reason was that they said, yes, we see that you're working hard. You are the first in, the last out, but you are in a senior role and you need to influence. You're looking after 18 boards, and that was my role back then. and you are not able to influence on the senior level that we need you to. And this was basically the turning point of my career because I didn't see it coming. And let's be honest, my ego was bruised, not just a little bit, but a lot. In fact, that much that I actually left the industry and got into recruitment, more specifically, digital and tech recruitment. Again, not my background. And that was quite a few years ago because I didn't understand a word that they were saying, but I still had to recruit for developers and analysts and business intelligence analysts. I simply ask a lot of questions. I even Googled what does SEO mean at the beginning because I had literally no idea at all. Now, what I didn't realize was that because I asked so many questions and I let those experts explain in such simple terms what they actually do, that I understand what they were doing, I could sell them and their story to my clients. And I've placed over 300 candidates over the next few years in the digital and tech industry. And I thought, you know what? I only have so many roles at any given time. What if there was a method that I could teach others how they can clarify what their competitive advantage is so that they can communicate it and do it consistently and cohesively online and offline so that they can commercialize it in one or another way. It might be through a more senior role. It might be through speaking engagements. It might be through a board role. It doesn't matter. In a second, you know what you can bring to the table and to whom you are in control. Boom, Impact was born. And I started my business in 2017. So this is what I've been doing full time since then. I've had the incredible honor to work with some of the largest companies from Amazon to Domino's to Microsoft to help their leaders and their emerging leaders on doing exactly that. How can we become the go-to in our industry? How can we become the trusted authority in our field? And I want to emphasize in their field, not in everyone's field. It's not about being a celebrity, it's about being an authority. And then 2021 and ongoing, I actually wrote a book about it. I would say it's not actually a book, it's kind of a Bible. It's quite a comprehensive step-by-step a roadmap where I share a lot of case studies and tips and tricks and strategies and everything in between, how we can actually make this transition. And I've had, again, the pleasure to speak at big conferences and big stages. And this is exactly what I teach my clients and my students to do exactly that in their industry, in their fields. So you see already, hopefully, that you can do exactly the same thing. Where you probably are right now is here. Your competence is high, your visibility is low, so you are the best kept secret. And this is what bothers you. This is where you get this itchy feeling saying, I've got so much more to give if somebody would just see it. Well, we can't rely on others to see it if we are not sharing it. This is where we need to increase our visibility in different ways. So the question is, where are you right now? Are you the one who is the best kept secret, who is known by maybe a handful of people for your area of expertise? They come already to you. That's great. But where we want to be is here. We want to be the go-to for speaking engagements, for the big stages, for the big roles. This is where we want to play. Now, if that ever happened to you, raise your hand. It has certainly happened to me. I've had those groundbreaking ideas and those big visions and missions, and I shared it with others. And then people are like, great. And to be honest, great is a response or an answer to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. And to be honest, I also don't care. So we want to avoid it. And how we do it is we have to take a roadmap to make the transition and go from being the expert in our field, having all the knowledge in our own head, to become the trusted authority that has got a systemized a framework, a process, a method behind their madness. Because in the end, if we are just an expert with an opinion, we still get stuck at a certain level. If our message is actually in focus and our framework, our method, our system can impact people, this is where we become the trusted authority. And how we do it is to follow a step-by-step process. Does it happen overnight? It would be great, wouldn't it be? But no, it doesn't. It happens gradually, but it does happen when you take the right steps. We all start here. We all start from ground zero. This is where we gain our experience, where we get our education in, where we earn our stripes. But then this is where most people get already stuck. They are not known for something special. They are not known to solve a certain problem. They definitely don't have their IP, their intellectual property, their knowledge systemized and then packaged in a way that is repeatable. And with that, also easier to communicate. When I say, how do you manage a project? Well, it depends. This is not the right answer in most of those cases. We want to tell exactly, well, firstly, you clarify, then you communicate, then you commercialize. This was just my example from my 3C framework. And again, this is what you can do also. I'm sure you already follow a system, a process, a method to get the results. But I could also bet my last t-shirt that you are not quite able to articulate that just yet in a way that is easy to understand, that's easy to follow, and can be condensed in a minute at a maximum and not extend to like an hour where people are fading away. And this is where the trusted authority framework and roadmap comes in, because it helps you to do exactly that. We are transitioning from the expert to authority. And there are three main pillars that we need to consider. Think of becoming a trusted authority like a three-legged stool. If you pull out one of those legs, it's going to be quite wobbly. You can probably still sit, you can probably still get some results, but it's not going to be sustainable to start with. And it's also not as confident as and as fast as you probably wish it to be. So let's start with capability, because this is where everyone starts. It's the easiest way, to be honest. It's the easiest pillar out of those three, because this is where we feel comfortable. We get another MBA. We enroll in another course. We get another certification. We stay in this role for another couple of years to get more experience. Great. But where does it lead you if nobody knows about you? And of course, also if they don't trust you. Building your credibility with social proof and with other people, with your content, this is where the magic happens. And this is also the foundation for you to be able to become visible and put it out there in form of pitches, networking opportunities, in terms of your own content. But don't worry, we are going through all of those pillars in detail right now. So grab a pen and paper if you haven't done it yet, because we are getting into the nitty and gritty. So first pillar is capability. And what our focus here is to become the translator and go from transaction to transformation. Now, what does it even mean? Now, your sustainable, which means your authentic capability, is a sum of credentials. And I want to emphasize again, a sum, not the individual part. Credentials are important, because if we don't have anything to back up our claim, what we want to actually stand for, we are a fraud. And this is certainly not what I advocate for and not what I stand for. So we're starting with our credentials. Then we connect it with our character. Because in the end, this is something that no one else can compete with. We've got our own personality, our own story. This is what we want to bring to the table that makes us different to everyone else. And the third part, which most also forget or are not able to integrate, is the changes, meaning what impact have I been able to create for others, leveraging my credentials and my character, because I can be the best at what I'm doing and can do it in a really fun and loving and caring way. But if I'm not able to translate what it actually means for others or provide value for others, nobody cares. So what are we going to do here is we are translating each and all of that. Our credentials, if we say we've got 5 years experience here and we've got 3 degrees there and we've got 2 awards there, it doesn't mean much. This is where we want to dig deeper and we want to find those transferable skills. that we actually want to stand for, that we can leverage no matter in which industry or direction or profession we want to go down the track. The characteristics, this is where we show our personal values and interests and strengths. This is where we show how we do what we do. So it's not just as important to show what we can do, but also how we actually do it. And this is also where your story comes in. Like, how did you actually get into your professional industry? What was the trigger that led you into that direction? This is what people are interested in. And the last C, our changes part, this is where we need to be able to translate what's in it for others. You having those 10 years of experience and those 3 degrees, what does it mean for me? Nothing. So this is where we need to go back and see what kind of results have I achieved? What kind of outcomes have I had? Where did I get praises for? This is what really moves the needle. And why this is so important to become this translator is because the world has shrunk into a global village. More degrees and more years of experience have literally become a commodity. And like it or not, but there will always be somebody who is smarter, who is wittier, who is more experienced, who is more educated, who is faster, who is cheaper. We cannot ever compete on that sustainably. And this is where we want to identify your uncommon denominator. Everyone focuses on the common denominator, which is your strength and ideal outcomes for others. Everyone else plays on exactly the same scale. Now, your strength, this is where we want to focus on. This is where we can set ourselves apart and do it authentically. Now, let me give you the exact framework how we actually do it. I always say we need to connect 2 worlds, and it could be different worlds. It could be anything from your personality that you bring into an industry that isn't associated with that. One of my clients is a financial advisor, for example, and he's quite out there, to say the least. Now, you wouldn't necessarily expect a financial advisor to be quite flamboyant and pink and bright. Well, but guess what? He is, and he brings that in all of his branding. And this is exactly what attracts certain clients to him, but also repels others. This is what a strong brand and a strong authority is all about. We know what you stand for. It's not ambiguous. It's not a, it's quite nice, it's quite good solution. No. It's an incredible solution or it's horrible. This is exactly what a strong value proposition is all about. Another way how you can connect 2 worlds is to say, I've got a completely different education background than every single other person in my industry. How can I take this and make this my competitive advantage? Because I can see different things, use a different approach in this industry that's lesser known, but creates incredible results. This is where we can make our mark without being inauthentic, without having to have written bestsellers and PhDs and all of the above. And I want to give you more concrete examples to get your inspiration going. If you think of those 3 thought leaders, Jamie Oliver, Brene Brown, and Steve Jobs, what do they have in common? They are all the translator. They all started with being the expert, but they didn't stop there. They actually became visible and translated what they knew in a way that makes sense to others. Think of Jamie Oliver. His background is actually gourmet cuisine, but he didn't stop there. He could have gone and become a 3-star Michelin chef in one of the top restaurants. That would be the expert. He's behind the scenes. A few people know of him. What he has done, though, he has made him more available, and he's connected gourmet cuisine with everyday family cooking. All of his branding is exactly associated with that. He wears checkered shirts, not the fancy apron. He eats with his fingers because this is what we do as a family. We are not using fancy ingredients that we couldn't even say the name correctly. He is representing those 2 worlds, and with that, he carved out his niche. He created an economy of one. No one else has done it before him. Take Brene Brown, incredible psychologist. She has had one of the best academic careers with her research. But again, she didn't stop there. She has been able to translate her knowledge, her insights, her findings from her research in a way that makes sense to decision makers in the business world. She focuses on shame and vulnerability and tells stories. She could have focused on doing more research and getting more academic, but she didn't. She decided to go wider and translate what she knows and all those highly fact-based and methodology based insights in an easy to understand language and case stories and case studies. This is where storytelling comes in. This is what she is known for. This is what she's thought after. And finally, Steve Jobs. You could see before when we watched the video from Steve Wozniak that he was not the tech person as such. He connected technology with innovation, with simplistic design. He was able to create Apple in the way it was because he's the visionary. He's the one who is able to connect what the end consumer is looking for with a tool, in this case technology, how we make this happen. So hopefully you start thinking about which worlds you can connect. What kind of background, experience, personality, interest, strength can you bring to the table and connect it with your profession or where you want to go next? This is step one, the translator. How can you translate your credentials into changes that you can make, into a way that makes an impact for others? Move on to our second pillar, which is the credibility factor. Now, credibility comes from the evidence, the logic comes from the head. Trust, however, comes from the heart, from emotions. What we need to do is we need to cover both. We need to provide studies and science and logic, but we also need to support it with personal stories, with insights, with behind the scenes. Where we start is we develop a framework, a signature method, a process that we can follow. This is the biggest part that sets apart experts from authorities. Because remember, experts, they jump onto the problem and solve it. Authorities are able to explain how they solve the problem. And that is where the framework comes in. Because if you always have to come up from scratch or solve it on the fly without a process that you can follow, you can't predict the outcomes. And if you're not really comfortable and confident with the outcome, you often struggle to actually articulate what you do. And this is where imposter syndrome comes in. This is what we want to get rid of. And this is why we, especially in the Trusted Authority program, but also in one-on-one coaching sessions, develop exactly that, a framework that we can follow. Yes, there are different tools in each of those stages, for example, that are applicable to one situation and not so much to another, but at least you've got your own framework to follow. You are able to communicate it from a holistic perspective to others who are not coming from your tech background, who are not as entrenched in your industry. There is quite a process to it, but to get you started, think about how do we get from A, where people are, to B, where they want to be. If you are a project manager, what would be your process to implement when you get engaged by a client and they say, we've got the $10 million, we've got the resources, make it happen. Having said that, it also comes down where you want to position yourself. Ideally, if you are a project manager, are you coming in early stage, for example, where we still map out everything? So your framework would look different to somebody who is actually managing the process and who is the implementer. So it comes down to this clarification of the first part, the capability. What is the promise that I want to stand for? And how can I back it up with performance from previous experiences? Because once we've got it, I'll come back to that in a second, we can then support it with stories. And this is where we connect emotions with logic. Last part, the last stage in our framework is the visibility part. Because in the end, you cannot not communicate. If we can't find you online these days, we are getting quite suspicious and think, what's wrong with this person? Do they have something to hide? Our responsibility is to translate our value message, our promise that we want to stand for, into visual and verbal representation. Meaning, how can we show up consistently and cohesively that people can pick up that it's us? It might be through colors and fonts and the tone and voice that we use. This creates trust because of memorability. It's always the same. I can predict how you show up. It's not one day blue and one day orange and one day purple. It's always the same colors. So it makes it easy for us to say, oh yeah, this is John and this is Susie and this is so and so, simply because we can absorb and process visuals a lot faster than text alone. And this is our visual aid. We can use it across social media, on our LinkedIn profile, which I'm a big fan of, but also how you show up in person. So it's very much connecting the online world with the offline world. How can we replicate you in your 3D version online? Because nowadays, most interactions happen online. And you can do the test yourself. Google the person who just started in your company. What can you find about them? But also Google yourself. You will see that you make up your mind very quickly, not only based on what they say about themselves and what others say, but also where else they show up, where the community piece comes in. Because when we Google somebody, we see obviously their LinkedIn profile, which ranks very highly, but this is only one piece to the puzzle. Have they had interviews somewhere? Do I trust them? Have they been awarded with something? But also, is there something bad about them that I need to know? We make up our decisions so quickly, so we can't leave it to chance what people find about us. We need to take control over the narrative that we tell, because based on the narrative we tell, other people tell also that narrative. If we leave it to chance, they also tell a narrative, probably not as favorable as we like it to be. In this part, what's really important is to visually and verbally represent your value. This is where you develop your brand style guide, also as a personal brand, also as a corporate professional. It doesn't need to be super fancy and very comprehensive, but it needs to be intentional. It needs to be thoughtful, and it needs to be consistent with your personality. And the final part is to add the layer of social proof. How can we put ourselves out there? And there are multiple ways. Again, it comes down to your personality and your preference. It could be by, if you're a strong writer, for example, content contribution, where you pitch yourself to different publications and to industry platforms. It could also be that you say, I want to actually speak a lot more because it's such a powerful way to establish yourself as the trusted authority. I want to speak at events. I want to pitch myself to podcasts. I want to speak up in town halls. So all of those visibility strategies are not only for external opportunities, but also for internal opportunities within your business, within your company. Referrals, and recommendations. Word of mouth is still the most powerful way to do marketing because it comes from people we know, like, and trust. So the question is, do you come up in conversations where you want to come up and also for the right reasons? Can you become part of an industry association to expand your network, to be in front of even more of the right people who share the same values, the same interests in you, who can open doors? And finally, social media coverage. You posting yourself, you are being reshared and reposted, for example, you being featured in media. There are multiple ways how you can build your credibility. So to sum things up, what does it take to become the trusted authority? It comes down to three components. It starts with capability, where we translate what we know in a way that resonates with others. We build upon that with our credibility focus, where we develop a framework around the promise that we make and can predict the performance that we have based on the steps, the framework, the method that we use. And finally, we are intentional who we want to be seen by, who we want to get in front of and talk about it. This is where the movement happens. Now, if that sounds something right up your alley, you are interested in exploring whether you can become the trusted authority in your field and what does it actually take for you to get there, then I invite you to book your free call and we go through your personalized situation where we talk through different strategies and also challenges, because I know there are a few, to help you overcome them. I honestly have made it my mission to get the best ideas and messages heard, not by the loudest people, but by people who actually can make an impact. And I cannot wait to get your message that matters out there.